We are.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dolly Begum. I'm the MPP for Scarborough Southwest. It is my pleasure to join you this evening. I want to thank everyone who's joining us live on different platforms. I believe we're streaming on Facebook, and we're going to try YouTube as well as our Twitter account. Today is a very important town hall that we're having because of the issue that we have heard from, I am hearing from constituents across Scarborough Southwest, but also Scarborough in general, and I think now across the province because of the importance of this particular bill. So today we're talking about Bill 23. It is the government's, they would like to call it, building more housing. But this legislation, this piece of legislation is one of the more dangerous legislations they have introduced. And we know this government has a record of bringing in really damaging bills to Parliament. But this is one particular legislation that actually really hurts the environment. It is going to strip apart our Greenbelt. And not only that, it does not actually address the actual crisis we're facing in housing. And they're using the sort of veil of housing and building more housing and making it more affordable as the talking points. But when we look at the different pieces of this actual legislation, it does not do that. So today, instead of me telling you all of this, I thought it'd be amazing to have people from different backgrounds, experts, and our community leaders to come together and actually have this conversation. We'll also have an opportunity for community members who are joining live to be able to send in their comments and ask questions that I can share with our panelists here. So without further ado, first I have with me the interim leader of the official opposition, his loyal opposition, Peter Tabuns, who's the MPP for Toronto Danforth, an incredible MPP, incredible leader who has fought for environment for many years. I know before he became an MPP, this was one of his passion, but also in Parliament, he has been a great fighter and a role model who's been incredible, really leading the issue of housing, leading the issue when it comes to protecting our environment and protecting our Greenbelt. So I thought it'd be incredible to have someone like Peter Tabuns to start off and give us an idea of what this bill really means right now, and just give us an idea of what the official opposition is doing to make sure that this kind of damaging legislation does not pass.
Okay. Well, Dolly, thank you very much for having me this evening, and thank you very much for hosting this meeting. It's a really critical one. I had a similar one last night, frankly, in Toronto Danforth. We had over 200 people attend, and we had a really good presentation by Phil Pothen from Environmental Defense. I don't think that there's a lot that's mysterious here. People need to understand that the Ford government really is not that interested in housing, but it is interested in making sure that friends of Doug Ford are able to buy and flip properties, develop properties, and make hundreds of millions of dollars in gains from redesignation of lands in the Greenbelt and, frankly, in a variety of places in Ontario. This is not a bill that's actually going to solve the housing crisis that we're facing here. It's not focused on providing affordable housing. It doesn't provide funding for nonprofit housing. It really is set up to make sure that land developers, land speculators can get as rich as possible as quickly as possible. Now, I know you're going to have someone speaking from the TRCA, and their technical knowledge is much greater than mine. But when you understand that the bill is going to be cutting back at the conservation authorities, driving them to give up land that's currently used either for flood protection or for species conservation, you'll understand that this is not a housing bill. Again, it's a speculation bill. And I know that people this evening, my apologies, I'm at a school. I'm going to be going into a meeting very shortly. You'll understand that this is going to be a fight over these speculators. And whenever Doug Ford talks about housing, it's just a shield. It's just a cover for making sure that his friends can get as rich as possible as quickly as possible. I do worry that the attacks on the conservation authorities will result in houses being built in places that will cause flooding. We're going to find a situation where the wetlands that are currently protected or the watersheds that are currently protected will be damaged in ways that will cause flooding in new areas that had not previously experienced these problems. All round, this is going to be bad news for anyone who's trying to find a home, live decently, and have a sustainable and protected environment in the province around them.
Thanks so much, Peter. Before we let you go, I know that you have a packed schedule today, so I really appreciate you joining us. Before we let you go, we have this bill already gone through one level of debate, and we have fought in the House right now. Can you give us an idea of where we are right now, and just a little bit of details in terms of Jessica Bell and Jeff Birch are the two critics who are working on this. Some idea of what's happening in Parliament.
Well, as you noted just then, we went through the first reading, which is just the introduction of the bill. We've gone through the debate on the second reading, and the bill is now gone to committee. There are hearings that are taking place. You may be aware that we've been pushing for a lot more hearing times, and those extra hearing times haven't been granted. In fact, today, former Toronto Mayor John Sewell was thrown out of the legislature because he was demanding an opportunity to speak. I find it extraordinary that the former mayor of Toronto wasn't allowed to come and speak. He is well known across this province and across this country as an expert on urban affairs and planning. And this is not a government that particularly wants to hear from anyone who has that expertise. So we're going to go through hearings. There's an opportunity within the next few weeks to go through the bill, as we say, clause by clause, item by item, with the NDP putting forward amendments, most of which will have been suggested by those people in this province who are really concerned about protecting our environmental values and making sure we do have affordable housing. When those debates clause by clause are concluded, then the bill as amended, and my guess is from past history, the government will have some amendments, and my guess from past history is they will block or try to block all the amendments we bring forward. When that's concluded, it will come back to the legislature for third reading and a final debate. I would say that given the government's numbers, they will pass this bill in third reading. So if people want to have an impact on the bill, now is the time. Now is the time to be phoning the Premier's office. Now is the time, if you live in Scarborough and you've got an MPP who's a Conservative, now's the time for you to contact that MPP and tell them that you want this bill thrown out. I don't think it's salvageable, frankly, and they need to know that the public wants this to be dealt with in a way that respects our needs and our environment. And this bill is not going to do that.
Thank you so much, Peter. Really appreciate it. I know you have to go, so we will let you go.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. It's wonderful to have you. I really appreciate it.
Okay, take care. Have a good evening, everyone.
Enjoy. What Peter just pointed out right now is a really critical time because it is in committee. And this morning, what happened is just unbelievable, especially seeing people who are trying to have a say are silenced by this government. One of the interesting things that we notice is the government will pass through legislation without having the ability to debate them properly or put time allocation. Thankfully, this one went to committee, but when it comes to the amount of people or who gets to come for the deputation, that's also controlled. And I think it's just what was pointed out is that this morning, one of the former mayors who wanted to speak against it was thrown out actually from Queen's Park. I want to move to our next guest, Michael. And I don't want to mispronounce your last name. Michael, is it Buns?
Yes, you got it right.
Buns.
Hold on.
I want to pass it off to you. Yeah, we do. To tell us a little bit about the work that you do, and tell us a little bit about the TRCA, and then.
Oh no, you got the wrong person. I'm not TRCA.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Joanna Kite.
Joanna Kite and Marianne Burns.
I am so sorry, Joanna. Go ahead.
No worries. Are we able to share our screen to provide a
yes.
PowerPoint?
Yes, go ahead. I'm going to make sure that you are a host.
You
I
should be
think-
able to share your screen. I've changed the setting.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Joanna, would you be able to tell us a little bit about the work that you do first?
Of course.
Okay.
Myself, I am a government and community relations specialist for Toronto and Durham region with the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. And with me is Mary Ann Burns, and she's the senior manager of provincial and regional planning policy at TRCA. And so TRCA, we are really we take a science-based approach to providing sound policy advice and leveraging our position as a nonprofit across the public sector to make sure that municipalities and communities have the data that they need to make sound planning decisions. And so we have over 30 years of monitoring and scientific expertise to support all of our partners in infrastructure development, in planning, in order to make very sound decisions based on science. And so we are really the region's first line of defense against natural hazards. And that was really why we were created back, I believe it was in the 60s, after major flooding events, to ensure that both people and property and the safety and well-being of our communities are protected. And now we carry out a wide range of services, from helping municipalities with infrastructure development, doing restoration services, habitat development, all of our flood and natural hazard protection. We carry out a wide range of services, both that are mandatory through the Conservation Act and also to support our municipal and infrastructure partners across the region. So in terms of Bill 23, I really just wanted to provide an overview of the response that TRCA has taken towards the bill and some of our key concerns, and highlight just, the key concerns and potential impacts for TRCA and the watersheds that within our jurisdiction. So on November 10th, we brought forward a board report, which includes a submission that was made by our Chief Executive Officer, John McKenzie, to Standing Committee in Brampton. And so that is posted on our website. And in that board report, you can find a very detailed description of TRCA's comments and concerns on the potential bill. And that's publicly accessible on our website. And TRCA has also been working very closely with municipal staff across the region to provide them with the information they need to understand the impacts to their business, their planning processes, and how they can best respond to the province as well. So some of the key, TRCA, we definitely support addressing the housing crisis, and we would very much like to work with our partners to expedite development approvals wherever possible. But we do have some significant concerns with some of the provisions in the bill, and one of the major ones is restricting us from commenting on natural heritage matters that intersect with natural hazards and climate considerations. And one of the key areas is also that Bill 23 doesn't allow the Conservation Authority to enter into service agreements with municipalities where they would like to request our services. So it's not only telling us that we do not have the ability, that it's not required that we do this work, but municipalities cannot ask us to do that work for them, to help them with development approvals and to help them with their planning processes and protecting their infrastructure and their planning and policies, ensuring they have climate resilient development plans, et cetera. So that is one of the key areas where we have concerns. The other is that provisions have been removed to allow us to make comments relating to pollution and conservation of lands as part of the test that be applied to a permit in terms of us providing permits to development applications. The other key thing is it's been made clear to conservation authorities that we really need to focus on our mandatory services that relate to natural hazards. But we really want to maintain that ability to work with our municipal partners, work with infrastructure infrastructure parties like Metrolinx, et cetera, to help them in reviewing and providing the scientific data that they need in order to make sound decisions. So moving on to more of our comments. So reducing and restricting the CA's rules really contradicts advice that was given by the Premier Special Advisor on Flooding, whose report actually recommended strengthening conservation authorities' roles. And the Housing Affordability Task Force recommendation did not raise an issue with conservation authorities and their plan review or permitting roles. That wasn't really seen as something that was creating a roadblock or a bottleneck in development approvals. And actually, under the current legislative framework, conservation authorities have actually saved taxpayers a lot of money, because what we do is we protect from development happening in areas where it can be destroyed by, extreme weather events. And this is something that we've seen happen in other provinces. And so TRCA helps to protect communities and homeowners against that. Reducing the conservation authority's ability to comment on planning applications. It also removes critical capacity in the development industry and the housing supply chain, because our environmental planners play a key role in approving much of the development that happens across the region, because we have many of the skilled environmental planners exist within TRC, and they don't exist in other places within the greater Golden Horseshoe area. And so if you take the ability away from TRCA to provide services to municipalities at their request, there aren't other planners available to fill those gaps. And we are concerned that will actually have a slowdown, that may create a bottleneck for development and housing approvals. So right now there are also no new costs continuing through non-mandatory services that CAs currently provide to the GGH, and municipalities have no alternative without, as I said, without new significant funds available. Municipalities really just don't have an option in terms of other resources to help them with their development approvals, with data to support their planning decisions. So there are many ways that TRCA feels it's possible to support housing in other ways without taking the ability away from conservation authorities to provide feedback on development, ensure that we are providing, that municipalities are able to provide a responsible development. And, one is, making sure that all of the development approvals that are already in place. So what we have a situation where there are many housing developments that have been approved, and we are really waiting for them. They're not yet built. And so working with, all of the various policy groups and developers to ensure that plans that have been approved are actually expedited and constructed. And we see that as a very effective means for getting more housing available sooner. We also think that it's very important to have more collaborative working tables and where we can work together to find good areas for housing, but also have good environmental planning surrounding. And I think that the Portlands in Toronto is a very good example of that. It's somewhere where the TRCA has worked very closely with Waterfront Toronto and the City of Toronto and the Waterfront Secretariat to create an entire new community, an area where there was no housing before. And we've worked very well together to create an area of the city that is now going to be a new neighborhood with thousands of new residential units available in an area that was previously not available for development because of flood concerns. So, we think there are many ways to engage and create catalysts for new development, also by investing in infrastructure that will help to protect existing lands that could be used for development, in flood vulnerable areas, such as the Rockcliffe neighborhood. And so those are really the things that we think are good strategies for moving forward. And so we provided our comments at Standing Committee. I'm also just going to open the floor to Marianne if you have anything else that you want to add in terms of the policy impacts to TRCA and some of the key, but really the key concern for us is us having an ability to work for municipalities at their request, to help them with expediting the approvals of planning permits, etc. Marianne, anything you'd like to add?
Thanks, Johanna. Yeah, I think you covered it well. But just to reiterate or review that CAs, conservation authorities, have two main roles in the planning and development process to assist municipalities with growth management. It's the advisory role, where we're environmental technical advisors to our municipal partners in our jurisdictions that share watersheds and that are a part of the board of directors of the CA, to advise them in their role implementing the planning policies of the provincial plans and the provincial policy statement. And so in that capacity, the municipality is the approval authority making the land use planning decisions, but the CA is there as an advisory body for both managing natural hazards and natural heritage and water resources. And then we have our decision-making role under our permit process under Section 28 of the Conservation Authorities Act. And Bill 23 is proposing to diminish both those roles through changes to the Conservation Authorities Act and the Planning Act, so that municipalities would no longer be able to enter into service agreements to provide advice in the planning process to assist them with conforming to provincial policies for environmental planning, for protecting the environment, for protecting natural heritage systems, water resources, etc. Currently, it's working quite well. We have great relationships at TRCA with our municipal partners. We have formal and informal agreements for plan review. And we were just in the process, because of Bill 229's amendments to the Conservation Authorities Act, requiring memorandums of understanding with municipalities. We were just in the process of updating those to ensure that we had those in place. So it's unfortunate that this bill has come in. It's been surprising to us all. And then in the permitting process, it's proposed that CA permits would no longer be required if something is approved under a Planning Act approval application. So and to take away as well, if we are going to issue a permit, to take away a couple of tests that we use to assess applications, like the conservation of land and pollution, which are a couple of tests that come in more on that natural heritage side and water resource management side, as opposed to the flooding and erosion test that the government is proposing to keep. So they're trying to focus us on our core role, as they say, of natural hazard management, which is fine. But at the same time, if we take away those tests of conservation of land and pollution, those are the watershed natural heritage system lenses that we do our hazard management role through. So it just doesn't make sense to us. Flooding and erosion are natural processes. They take place within the natural heritage system. And we do that natural hazard management role so well because we have the holistic view, the comprehensive view of our watersheds that these municipal partners share, and that's in our jurisdiction. Whereas municipalities, if now under Bill 23, they'd be left to do this alone and only within their jurisdiction, within their own political boundaries. And as we all know, the natural systems that we're trying to manage and protect development from are dynamic systems that don't see political boundaries. So it just doesn't make sense to us. And we're hoping that the submissions that we've made to standing committee will have some effect, and there'll be some changes to the bill.
Thank you so much, both Marianne and Joanna. I do have a follow-up, just a quick one. And one of the things we're noticing is a lot of municipalities are feeling very worried as well, especially with the downloading of the responsibility of zoning, but without the resources and without the ability to actually protect some of the things that you just talked about. Do you have any comments? And I know there are a few people that also joined in and talked about, if they can't, so Kathleen wrote, if they can't engage the TRCA for consultation, where would they be getting environmental recommendation from? And I think that is the heart of this whole bill, as well as the previous bill that you mentioned, when we also had conversations and how that took away really the authority that the TRCA has to be able to do their job. I would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Mhm. I can only assume they would be turning to outside consultants. I mean, the larger municipalities perhaps would have some staff on board already that could provide that service. But like I said, in our jurisdiction, our municipalities, even the larger ones, rely on us heavily for our expertise and our experience and our wealth of environmental data from all the years of monitoring that conservation authorities do. So we're saying that this seems counter to the purpose of the bill to streamline things when it would make things more complicated, it obviously cause some delays and extra cost to municipalities if they would have to go and outsource for the service that CAs are already providing.
Thank you so much. I think you've given us a really excellent summary of how it impacts your ability to also do the job of protecting, the biodiversity, the wetlands, and exactly what's happening with the erosion of this sort of environmental protection that were set up in our province and across, within the different municipalities. I'm really excited to have our next guest, because when we heard this individual reached out to the office, we were just, we were a little bit shocked and pleasantly surprised, I should say, because Michael was actually part of the task force that that I think, drew up the original plan for the Greenbelt. And it is so wonderful to have you here with us, Michael. Please tell us, what you feel about this bill and what it means, and actually give us a little bit of the history as well. So everyone, please welcome Michael Bunce.
Hi. The history is complicated and long, and I keep it here all night. But first of all, how do I feel? Well, I better be careful what words I use. Very angry and frustrated and also betrayed, because when the task force met, and interestingly enough, John McKenzie, whose name was just mentioned, was at that time working in the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and invited me, because I'd been one of his professors, I guess, in the planning program at U of T, invited me to be on the task force because he was responsible for forming the task force. So we met, and we met in several different parts of the region of the Greater Golden Horseshoe over a period of 2 years. And we drew up, after a lot of discussion, public hearings, which were well attended by people who were very supportive of the concept of the Greenbelt. And we made recommendations eventually on what the plan should look like, what it should contain. And what really angers me about this bill and other attempts by this government to chip away at the Greenbelt is that it completely undermines the spirit and purpose of the Greenbelt and of Greenbelts generally. I mean, the whole purpose of the Greenbelt is to, as the plan, the wording of the plan says, I'll just read it now, is to create a broad band of permanently protected land. For, I guess, in the reviews of the plan, which were required by the legislation, that protection became stronger under the previous government, the previous Liberal government. And at those hearings for whether the plan was reviewed, there was no question of weakening the Greenbelt or of taking pieces out of it the way in which it's been proposed. The worst thing about the bill as it stands is that it fragments. it fragments agricultural land, it fragments natural environment, it fragments wetlands, it just takes pieces out of it. Once you start doing that, as you know, it's like, you chop off one piece of a limb and the whole limb dies. And this is what's going to happen. There's no question. That was one of the concerns of the task force, is that we had to make a propose a plan that would guarantee the overall integrity of the Greenbelt as a broad area, a broad band of land around the Greater Golden Horseshoe. And of course, there have been pieces of the Greenbelt that have been removed from the Greenbelt, but I think most of the time that's happened is because municipalities have requested it in order to allow for particular fairly small areas of development. It's generally not been something a top-down process by the provincial government, which has just decided, overall that it will take away pieces of land from the Greenbelt. So, in that respect, agricultural land is one of my particular interests, and the reason why, of course, developers and speculators have been buying up land in the Greenbelt, agricultural land, a lot of it in the Greenbelt, is because they must have known that this legislation was coming, and they realized then that farmers would be only too happy to sell up if they got the right price. The Greenbelt created a situation in which the market value of land was downgraded, and it reduced the incentives to farmers to sell, and quite a few of developers just walked away, and farmers were then provided with some certainty, some sense that they could continue farming that land without having to feel under pressure from development, from developers, in fact. So that's one particular consequence of this that really concerns me. I think the other thing is that the broad public support for the Greenbelt was, to me, quite surprising at the time. And I think over the years since the plan was, the Greenbelt plan, the legislation was introduced, it was passed in 2005, that support has grown. And the Greenbelt Foundation is very active in promoting that, and provides grants to people to do work within the Greenbelt. And it also supports other agencies, like, for example, the conservation authorities. I think if there's one way to oppose this bill is to tap into the strong public support that has existed over the last 15 years more for the Greenbelt, for the concept of the Greenbelt, for the function of the Greenbelt, for the role of the Greenbelt in making sure we don't have a sprawling a metropolitan region, and I think that is the way in which we can look at the details. We can talk about the protections of environmentally sensitive areas and wetlands and all the details of how that can be achieved. But if you want public support, you have to give them something that they can understand, that they can support. And once you start talking about the spirit and purpose of the Greenbelt and of protecting agricultural land and natural environment and of the countryside generally, because the word countryside always cropped up in the task force. This is countryside. This is where we don't want to be having the city sprawl, because people love countryside. They like to go out there and for recreational purposes, like the idea of the fact that it's still there. So I think my concluding observation would be that that would be something that the party could focus on.
Thank you so much. I should say, Professor Bunce, thank you for that. One of the things you reminded me of is whenever you talk to a farmer and you talk about food security, you talk about agricultural land, there's one bit that they're always cautioning us about, which is when you pave over any agricultural land, that's it. That is it. And where there's a housing piece, there is a poverty piece, there is environmental piece, there's also a food security piece to this as well. And it's just it's going to have significant impact on that and Ontario's ability to produce. And over the last couple of days, we have been asking the Minister of Agriculture to answer our questions on this. And most of the time she has refused to get up. And it will be the Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs who instead gets up and responds to the question. And I just found that really interesting. And today, my colleague actually had to push and say, I would really like the Minister of Agriculture, who comes from, say, one of the areas where she's supposed to be, impacted, to answer this. And it was just, so thank you so much. I really, it's one of those pieces that I think has to be part of the equation as well, because we're talking about agricultural land. We're talking about land that we cannot get back once you pay over that.
But the other point of the purpose of the Greenbelt was to protect agricultural land, natural environment, wetlands, recreational areas, rural communities, to protect the economic activities of small communities. They all tie together. So the holistic approach of the Greenbelt not only protects agricultural land for food security, but also ensures that agricultural activities also carry on in an environmentally sustainable way by protecting, for example, wetlands, which are within agricultural properties. And when that happens, then farmers have much stronger incentive to farm sustainably. If you fragment it, it's not just paving it over. That reduces the incentive to engage in sustainable farming, to exchange in more diversified agriculture, like fruit and vegetable production instead of just grain production, which is a lot of what goes on in the Greenbelt. You will see the amount of corn and soybeans that's grown in the Greenbelt just to feed cattle. That's it in huge areas of it. And one of the statements that we made was that agriculture, the Greenbelt would encourage the diversification of agriculture into more sustainable local food production. And it has in some areas. I mean, we have some excellent examples of community-supported agriculture schemes, of organic farming schemes, and so on, all because they have the protection of the Greenbelt. And so it's not just paving it over that's the issue. It's destroying the ability of agriculture to continue in a sustainable way.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I want to come back to that after as well. I know there are a lot of folks who have joined our live and have asked questions and sent us comments as well that I'll go to next after. So thank you so much to those of you who are sending us questions. I want to move to Misha next. Misha has been an excellent advocate in the community from the Danforth Gardens. So please go ahead, Misha.
Thanks, Dolly and group. My name is Misha Perazak, and I'm grateful that Dolly and her team are raising this issue, and I'm heartened by the interest from our Scarborough Southwest community. I'm the organizer of, one of the organizers of Danforth Gardens Neighborhood Association. We're located just east of Warden Station. Danforth Gardens has been active in environmental issues for the last several years, organizing typical community stuff, ravine cleanup, sponsoring the Tree for Me program, promoting the City of Toronto optional tree program, and implementing 2 Pollinate TO grants. I'm also chair of the newly formed Scarborough Junction community that was formed primarily to deal with the wave of development hitting our ward. But a key committee from this group is one that's trying to establish the West Scarborough Rail Trail, which is a proposed new rail and hydro corridor trail that we'd like to create that's been planned for the last 50 years and has never happened. So I share this information as an example of the many environmental projects happening in neighborhoods around our ward. I really think it's time for us to come together and speak with a unified voice on issues great and small, including the Greenbelt. So the Greenbelt issue seems quite straightforward to me, as it's been pointed out by Peter and Michael, and I'm sure the speakers after me. We have a blatantly developer-friendly provincial government whose main concern is to make money for its private sector construction friends under the guise of addressing Ontario's housing crisis. It kind of says it all when a developer knowingly spends $80 million to buy up Greenbelt land, and the Premier is suddenly putting forward legislation to open up Greenbelt lands that he said he wouldn't touch. It's in print, it's on tape, okay? And the Ontario government's approach is misguided, and disingenuous. To take more prime farmland and sensitive environmental areas and trade them off by protecting other lands to build more suburban subdivisions is nothing if not archaic and self-serving. We should be protecting the current green belt and growing it, not trading it off for expediency or for profit for a bunch of speculators. And that's all this is. That's been clear from the other speakers as well. Our environment is in crisis and our food security is getting more tenuous. We need to have natural areas for the health of our planet, for us to recreate in and to connect to the natural world. We need arable farmland close to us to ensure a safe, healthy food supply. This is about food security and controlling what is put on our food and not put on our food. But these points are obvious to those assembled here, and I'm sure we will hear this cry repeated over the course of the evening. Just talking about this will not save the green belt or the environment. We need to come together as small communities, just like small creeks and streams join to create a mighty river and become a force for the Ontario government to reckon with. I think it's time for the Scarborough Southwest Enviro Group to expand its current form and scope and become a voice for our ward that we can add to the voices of other communities and environmental groups to be heard together at Queen's Park. I think the SSW Enviro Group Reimagined could assist with individual residence projects like home pollinator gardens, neighborhood projects like tree plantings, cleanups, and pollinator gardens, ward-wide projects like revitalizing Taylor Creek and creating the West Scarborough Rail Trail, and provincial issues like the Greenbelt and creating new environmental policy. The Greenbelt issue is simple, but solving it in the face of developer interest will be difficult. It's time to organize and act. Let's have a Scarborough Southwest Enviro Group meeting, and let's get started with outreach and activism. Public pressure influenced the recent CUPE negotiations, and we need that same level of engagement for the Greenbelt and for the TRCA. So that's what I have to say today.
Thank you so much, Michael. Misha, I know that you got a comment from Michael Don, actually, who talked about if this bill contravenes the Canadian Environmental Protection Act and our right to a healthy environment. And I think what Misha just talked about is our right to a healthy environment and what's happening across Scarborough Southwest, across the city, across this province, and the idea of this bill and how, the reason why the Greenbelt was created and Peter talked about this and Michael talked about this, which was that this bill is allowing that speculation. And the fact that a lot of the land, these specific pieces were purchased right before. And we actually asked this question in the morning, about the timeline. So for example, in September, there is a piece of land that was purchased, which is now going to be part of that strip that's going to be extracted from the, so I mean, I can't say the word disingenuous inside the house, but I can say it here. And I think Misha's right. That's exactly what we're seeing when we talk about the way that this legislation is designed.
Well, I can say it. And as Michael pointed out, you can't piecemeal the Greenbelt. It's a belt. It's not a broken jigsaw puzzle or a partially built jigsaw puzzle. It's the puzzle complete. You take pieces out, it's not a puzzle anymore. It's not a green belt anymore. It needs to be continuous. And I really think we need action, like right up to, I don't know if we can get people out, but rallies at Queen's Park to that level and everything below that. So thank you for the time.
Thank you so much, Misha.
And I'll be waiting for that Scarborough Southwest Environmental Group meeting invite soon, I hope.
We will actually have, I think we're going to have a Scarborough Southwest Environmental Group meeting about this issue as well,
Yes.
about Bill 23, if we can fit it in before the bill passes. I know that the government has a very tight timeline because that's what they do. They rail through and they allow for less discussion. And I know there are some people who actually wrote about this in our comments as well, which is really impacting the democracy in our province. So I'll get to that after. I know we have two more panelists on our Zoom call here that I want to get to. Thank you, Misha. I want to move to Echo next. Echo is actually, I got a chance to visit Echo's garden for our, the native garden, the Pollinger garden that we are recognizing. So Echo is a local constituent who is also an environmental activist. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So you may not know that I was born and raised in the Greenbelt. Can you hear me okay? I'm from Niagara and grew up on Niagara peaches and corn. And now the wineries are really blossoming and it is a tourist attraction, bringing in a lot of money for the province. And, I think that Mike made a good point that we love the countryside. Lots of people from Toronto flock there. You've been on the QEW, it's like a parking lot. And taking away some of that green space to turn it into housing isn't going to be the affordable housing that they claim it to be, because people who need affordable housing also need jobs and they need the TTC. People who need affordable housing maybe don't have a car, but they're going to go and build McMansions on things that should remain green for biodiversity, for species at risk. The houses going in there, they just can't pretend are going to be affordable. Affordable housing needs to be in the city. We should be building up and not out. And I agree completely of expanding the green belt instead. That's really all. That's just my sentimental piece, that I thought it was permanent. It was written to be permanent, and that's how it should stay.
Thank you so much. I know Michael has a thought on this. I can see him nodding. I'm going to come back to you after. I want to go to, thank you so much, Echo. I want to go to Alex next. Alex Schmidt, another constituent and excellent advocate for democracy, but also for the environment. So please go ahead, Alex.
Okay, well, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great, thank you. Obviously, I'm very concerned with things I've been reading about Bill 23, trying to look at as many sources as I can to get a handle on what's being done, the impacts, and just understanding more about it. In my readings, I've found two good descriptions of the bill. One person describes it as a cluster bomb that the provincial government has dumped on the province. And there's a politician from Simcoe region, I believe, who referred to Bill 23 as something like cutting an onion with a chainsaw. You'll get a result, but there's not going to be much left. So on that note, going through readings, there are many negative impacts of Bill 23. Some of them have been touched here. I've got a list of 11. That includes loss of farmland, Ontario Land Tribunal changes, the changes discussed earlier to the conservation authorities. The municipalities are taking a huge hit on a number of fronts. Local democracy is undermined, as is their planning authority. There will be significant revenue losses with the changes to development fees, which of course will be the municipalities will have to make up for that through the existing residents, through property tax increases. Their role in park planning, the municipalities' role in park planning is diminished, as is their ability to take climate change measures. Most notably, well, I live in Toronto, so Toronto's green standard is in jeopardy. There's issues of tenant protection and heritage protection. A last one is that the bill will promote or speed up aggregate development. So we'll be seeing more quarries, more pits. And sorry, it was Michael who raised the idea of preserving our countryside and how important that is. That's something, I mean, especially during the pandemic, staying closer to home, I've discovered, or I should say our family has discovered, well, the trail network in the Oak Ridges Moraine area, like to the north and east of us. It's beautiful countryside. We've seen it all seasons, winter, fall, what have you. It's just beautiful. And the thought of what's happening, like the thought of having the countryside marred with quarries and pits and some of the other things discussed with the TRCA discussion, it's frustrating. It's very saddening. In terms of farmland, I just wanted to add a few comments. An excellent site, if you want more information, is the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, the OFA. Now, even going back to 2016, based on Census of Agriculture, they found that Ontario was losing 175 acres a day of farmland. Now, this has increased dramatically. It is now indicated as 319 acres a day that we're losing. And as mentioned, this is a finite resource, and you have to ask yourself, how long can we sustain this kind of loss? The issue of food security has been raised, local food production. It makes us more reliant on imports, vulnerable to supply chain issues, which is a factor in rising food costs. I can't believe that we're not taking stronger measures, to protect our farmland. And unfortunately, Bill 23 will accelerate this loss. It just strikes me as so short-sighted, destructive, and irresponsible. If people are interested, the OFA is organizing a petition. Their goal is 45,000 signatures, and I believe they're at about 43,300. Actually, I won't go into, I wrote some notes for each of the points. I won't go into the details. I mean, those are the things that are being impacted. I want to get to a question that Misha raised earlier. I mean, how are we going to address this? How do you get people on side? And he referred to a united front. That works, and he's talking about having that happen at a certain level, like within Scarborough, and then us connecting with others. I would like to suggest, and I've texted Dolly about this a few times, I think we have to do something bigger than that to make a dent in conservative support. I mean, I saw an Abacus poll dated November 6th. It was issued November 6th. So that was after the notwithstanding clause. I mean, Ford's numbers took a hit, his popularity or plus minus, whatever you want to call it. But the Conservative Party is still at 38%. And the conclusion is they would still win an easy majority. The NDP and Liberals are split virtually evenly, 27 and 26%. The Green Party's at 5%. So to make a dent, I think we have to take that united front or common front idea a step further. I would love to see each of the opposition parties working together, seeing the leaders of the NDP, the Liberal Party, and the Green Party on stage doing joint statements, being accompanied by people that represent the farming sector, environmental groups, tenant groups, the municipalities. I think that would have a much stronger impact. It would send a much stronger message. It would certainly get the media's attention. I would hope it gets people's attention. And it should get the government's attention, seeing the opposition work together. So besides that idea, the other thing I think is out there to take advantage of is getting support in the 905 belt. I mean, I look at some of the things that the government is doing, and it's like, I don't know, I mean, are they trying to commit Harry-Carry here? And they rely on a fair number of seats from the 905 belt. And, you know, I'm reading through some local newspapers from Simcoe County, from Barrie, from Halton Region, and there are a good number of mayors and councillors and regional councils that are quite upset about this process, asking, like, where did it come from? We weren't consulted. The timing of these, the standing committee in terms of getting public input and all the rest. We just had a municipal election. New councils were just sworn in a day or two ago. And I understand the deadline for written submissions is tomorrow, if I've got that correct. Yes? So
I believe it is tomorrow.
yeah, so I mean, given the impact on municipalities, their revenues, you know, their authority in terms of planning, you know, getting involved in the process in terms of park planning, you know, protecting heritage and tenants and all the rest of it. It's like, seriously, you are not going to allow them the opportunity to examine this thoroughly and to have an opportunity to express their concerns? So again, I think you can tap into that. And the other thing too is to make up for the shortfall in lower development fees and other fees. It's got to be made up in one of two ways. Either the residents in the 905 belt are going to be paying higher taxes. I believe it was Simcoe County estimated they would lose 175 million in revenues from lower development charges. And that equates to about a 4% tax increase. I think if the opposition starts letting people in 905 belt know that, hey, you're going to be on the hook for tax increases, or if the municipal governments choose service cuts, you know, you're going to lose out one of two ways. And I think you have to increase that awareness. So I think, and I think if the Conservative Party starts seeing it, the 905 belt being approached on issues like that and starting getting people on side, I think that's going to wake them up. Anyways, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much,
thank
Alex.
you very much for the opportunity to speak.
I can tell, I can see that visibly how frustrating this bill is for you, and I know for many others who, and I know from the emails and messages that we have gotten, there are so many that feel the exact same way, especially.
It's incomprehensible.
Mm-hmm.
And the points we made earlier, that they're concerned with climate change. I mean, how can you undermine the TRCA at this time?
Yeah.
When you've got more severe weather incidents more frequently? You know, how can you undermine the city's ability to address it locally, like the Toronto Green Standards? I mean, so much of this bill makes absolutely no sense. Like, I don't know, they're sociopaths. I just don't understand what's going on. So again, sorry, I'll be quiet, and good luck to you, the rest of the opposition, all these various groups trying to fight this.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate, and I know that you talked about certain solutions as well. And I see that there are people who are talking about different things that they can do. And I want to touch on a few things, because I think, and Echo just messaged as well and said, you know, these were excellent points. And when we talk, how are they able to purchase land that is meant to be protected? And that's the whole issue of it. You know, you can purchase the land, but it was not supposed to be zoned in a certain way. But now they're taking certain steps to reduce the authority, reduce the power of conservation authorities. And they're also changing the zoning. They're also, by the way, taking away the approval authority of municipalities. And I think there's actually a few things that Alex talked about that I would, first, I welcome anyone that wants to work together. And I think, and this is, Alex, you and I have talked about this in the past as well. I think these kind of issues, especially when we talk about the environment, the crisis that we're seeing, that's already here. This is not a partisan issue, and we have to put any partisan hats aside to fight this. And I know that there are people in our caucus who are willing to fight together with anybody and everybody to say we need to be standing strong to protect our Greenbelt, to protect the environment, to protect the fact that the entire ecological health of our province, of our country is at stake, and also the way this government is playing around with our democracy. And the reason why we were able to win with Bill 28 just earlier this week, the fact that they came forward and they repealed that bill, is because I don't think Premier Doug Ford likes seeing his numbers drop. I don't think he likes, seeing all the different labor organizations, all the different, including, organizations that supported him, come forward and say, no, you don't trample on our right to bargain. You don't trample on our right to fair wages. And that is the piece that I think we have to really analyze and use to learn, to say here's something that we have done and we can do it for other things. And there are different pieces, like repealing Bill 124, for example, the wage suppression bill, which we're losing healthcare workers, and this specific legislation specifically impacting the Greenbelt. The other thing you talked about is the impact it'll have. And I think those are some of the messages actually even we haven't talked about, is what it means. The fact, property taxes, something a lot of people may not resonate with in terms of in this bill, but when they look at the impact and their own property taxes, they will start thinking about something that impacts them individually. And I know there are different ways that people can have this conversation about this legislation. And I know right now the government is trying to portray a picture about, we're going to allow you to, build 3-story homes, and therefore you can do all these different sorts of things. Hold on for a second. Let's look at actually what this legislation will do, because, and I'm going to ask Maisha to actually put up the map of the Greenbelt, the most updated one that I can find that's available online, because it shows you the belt that it is on our province. So if I don't know if I'm reversed on the screen, but there are a lot of land that are already zoned for development, for affordable housing, for example. If the government really wanted to build affordable homes, they can build affordable homes. If the government wanted to fix the housing crisis, there are things they can do within the existing model. And there are ways they can also help people with multi-generational homes, with laneway housing, where you don't have to touch the Greenbelt at all. And that is what the heart of this legislation right here, that's the problem with it. It's this, I think it's 135 pages long legislation that is supposed to be about more homes built faster. No, it does not have anything to do with building more homes. What it does is building more developments on green spaces, on protected green belt, and in a really fast pace where only a few who have purchased specific land will benefit. Only specific developers who are donating to the Conservative Party will benefit. And I'm really sorry to say this, but that is one of the most cruel and vicious things you could do to this province. It will have really bad impact, for many more years to come, because you can't go back. This kind of moves, you cannot go back. Maisha was able to put up the and Michael, you can actually tell us a little bit about. I know that you're nodding when Echo was talking and when Alex was talking.
Sorry, what do you want me to tell you about?
We have the map of the Greenbelt.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, that's it. That's the whole point about it being a broad band. More than a band, it's a broad region almost, and it also, the other thing about it is it cuts across all of the municipal boundaries. it recognizes, particularly in the case of the natural environment, that nature knows no boundaries. It doesn't observe political boundaries. And so we have, having said, I mean, the observation has been made that that the power of the municipalities has been reduced, and municipalities, certainly many of them will be upset by this legislation. A few won't be, of course, because there are some like Lincoln down in Niagara region whose tax base depends upon more construction, more housing, more development, because they have such a small tax base. And if only they could go to a much bigger regional tax base, it would solve that problem. But that's it. And you see that the Greenbelt also includes all those conservation areas, all those watersheds in, for example, the TRCA, the Rouge. Now, that piece of the Rouge is a national park, and somebody, I think in the chat, raised the question of whether the federal government get involved, because one way of getting them involved is getting them to turn large chunks of the Greenbelt into national parks, and then the province couldn't touch it. But I have no other comments on the map. It speaks for itself.
Thank you so much, Michael. I think that actually it also shows how you don't have to touch the Greenbelt. You can build housing. If you're really honest about building housing, you can build housing, and you can make sure that it's affordable. And the other piece that I know we actually don't have enough time to go into this detail of it, which is a whole different other piece about tenants protection, homeowners protection, the type of development that will take place, and whether it's actually affordable. So you can have a whole sprawl of developments, but if you don't have the ability for people to live in these homes, you're not addressing the housing crisis that we're facing. You're not addressing the homelessness crisis.
But if you don't mind, the other thing that we know, if you look at this map, is that if we take the areas north of the boundary, the built boundary of all of those regional municipalities, that is called White Belt. And White Belt is land which is not within the Green Belt and can be developed. It was always assumed that it could be. And and in fact, that was a point John Sewell was making years ago. So I was interested to hear his name come up. So there is enough land within the White Belt to build homes on for the next 30 or 40 years at least. Interestingly, one of the representatives of the developers in the task force, on the task force, made that point and said we don't really need the land in the Greenbelt. They were perfectly supportive of the Greenbelt because there was plenty of land still going to be available for development.
I'm not sure if I'm muted. I'm seeing. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. We can hear you.
Yep.
Thank you so much. I wanted to go, and thanks so much, Michael. I wanted to go back to one of the things that Alex talked about. And I know that there's a petition that we're sharing, but the deadline for submission is tomorrow. So for those of you who are watching it, I know there are quite a few that have shared their comments and written to us. If you'd like to share how you're feeling, if you'd like to tell the government, and if you'd like to be like to make sure that it's part of the committee reporting, then please do send that by tomorrow, 7 p.m. But if you'd like to write to your MPP and you live outside of Scarborough Southwest, there are 4 MPPs in Scarborough who are conservative. Please write to them. There are 83 conservative MPPs you can write to, and write to the ministers, write to the premier. They need to know what they're doing, and they need to understand that people across the province are upset. Michael just talked about John Sewell, the former mayor. This morning, he spoke against it, and he wanted to depute. Unfortunately, he was removed from Parliament. He was removed from the vicinity here because the government does not want him to talk about this exact issue that we're talking about right now. I want to go a little bit into some of the comments, and Michael, I know you have to head out. Alex, thank you so much to all of you who have joined. If you'd like to answer any of the questions, please do stick around and have a thought on some of the comments that we have received. I know that Jennifer wrote to us and said, Jennifer Marinos wrote, is there a platform that outlines what areas in Toronto or Ontario that has space that needs for affordable housing? I don't believe that all these condo developments are the answer. I agree with Jennifer. And I think we touched on this a little bit, which comes to the idea of this legislation, because it doesn't actually address that. The type of developments we're talking about does not actually address affordable housing. And we can also share with you specific areas that are, well, not all of them have actually outlined what areas are specifically for affordable housing, because this legislation does not do that. It does not specifically talk about affordable housing. The other person, there's also, I think Don Pearson wrote about the bill contravening Canadian Environmental Protection Act. And one of the things we're going to try to do is actually find out, well, I know that there is, Peter Tabbins was here earlier, and he talked about environmental defense and what the work that they're doing. And I think there are quite a few other organizations that are also trying to find out different ways to push this. But before we even get to any of the legal part of it, I think this bill just should not pass. And that is the heart of it right now. We have to do anything and everything to protect our green spaces. There is another comment that we had from Kathy, who talked about the proposed amendment to the Greenbelt plan, and she actually shared the link. Environmental Registry of Ontario is still open to public feedback right now, and she shared the link here as well. We also have comments from if you is it Pirowin? I hope I'm not. I hope I didn't butcher that name. Pirowin wrote, if we want to stop sprawl from destroying nature and farmland, isn't the answer increased density in Toronto? There are areas that are zoned for development. They're zoned for specific type of development, and with community consultation, with specific communities involved, and municipalities involved, and the TRCA involved, you can do those. And that's exactly what we're talking about. We have to have legislation that actually addresses the need for that. Jen Smith wrote a comment as well, which is how we're filling the vacant units of the. Yes, this is actually a great point, and this is something that I've talked about in Parliament as well when it comes to our existing housing and the way we're managing that. Because right now we have a seniors couple, for example, in certain homes where they are waiting for a 1-bedroom, but they're living in a 3-bedroom. They don't need. But they cannot move out because they would be homeless if they move out, because they do not have that 1-bedroom available. And in the market rate right now, they cannot afford to move into a rental market where they have the ability to, they don't have the ability to go into a 1-bedroom. And that is a systemic problem with housing in our province, with housing in our city, that we need to address, that we are not looking at yet, and that we have to do a much better job of. We have a lot of people who actually wrote some really great comments, and I apologize, I'm not able to get through everyone. I know that we're just close to the end time right now. Don Pearson wrote, we also have to reconsider what we build. Land can't continue to be filled with large detached single family homes. It's the type of homes that we have to consider as well, absolutely. We shared the link with you in terms of the petition that you can share with your community members. We have some amazing people who are advocating against this legislation. I want to thank them. I also want
I can't hear you, Dolly. Are you muted?
No.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay. My screens just went from one to another. Okay. So I was just I hope people got to hear the comments and the questions that I read out. I went through quite a few of them, and I tried to answer them. If I missed anyone, please let me know or write to our office. I'll be happy to answer your question. We have shared the petition on our comments, so please do sign. Please do share with everybody else. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. If you would like to make a submission to the committee, as Alex mentioned, please do so before 7 p.m. tomorrow. And I want to thank everyone who's joined. I know that a few of my panelists are still here. I know we've gone way beyond the hour mark that I promised them. So if you have any comments, Alex, Echo, or anyone else, and I think Michael's still here, I think as well, please do share. We have just a few more minutes left. I'll pass it off to Alex and I'm having some technical difficulties, so I have two screens now. Alex, I'll pass it off to you to say some closing remarks, and then we'll wrap it up.
No, it's just too much details, too little time. I'll just stand by with you know, what I said earlier today. But thanks very much for the opportunity again.
Thank you so much. I know you had specific details about the legislation that you wanted to share about. Is there anything that you want to talk about in terms of actions, and I know you talked a little bit about that as well. I mean, we can spare a few minutes. I know that you had quite a few different notes that you wrote down.
Yes. Yeah, just looking through it, and
we also got quite a few comments actually, who talked about the different types of housing and development that's necessary in our city. You know, and I think the comments itself actually, if the government looked at the conversations, they would find better solutions, better ideas for legislations than what they have right now. Because people talk about, you know, what we have zoned, what kind of abilities we have, and when you have community consultation, when you use the TRCA, when you use the existing zoned, you know, areas, you can provide affordable housing. You can address the crisis.
So we know they're lying. So then what do you do about that?
You call them out. You call them out for lying.
Yeah.
And that's what we did last week, right? 18 of our members got thrown out for that. But you have to do it. You have to do that.
actually,
Go ahead, Alex.
sorry. Yeah, actually, I was just looking through my notes, and maybe there is one last thing to get in. I had referred to changes to the Ontario Land Tribunal and the related processes with that. Living in Scarborough Southwest, particularly Birchcliff, we were dealing with a lot of development proposals. I just saw the latest one for Birch Mountain Danforth Road, that area. And the impression I get from people involved, like with the Altry proposal, that how difficult it is to have sort of meaningful engagement, you know, with developers, with the city, you know, trying to get some changes, some compromise. And with Bill 23, it's going to be, the circumstances are going to be tilted even more so to the advantage of developers. If it's hard now, it's going to get so much harder. And I listed a few changes that are being considered here in the Bill 23. For example, tribunal will be encouraged to award costs against those who are unsuccessful. So that's kind of, you know, that's going to make you think twice about challenging. Municipalities are restricted using site plan control. And that's a way of, you know, getting to the nitty gritty, you know, making changes that are most objectionable and trying to fight for things that the community wants. I mean, that's going to be removed. For when there's 10 or fewer units, they're entirely exempted from site plan control. The tribunal will have the power to dismiss appeals without a full hearing. It restricts third-party appeals. The time frame's reduced from 120 days to 90 days after the permit application. So all these things are going to conspire and make citizen participation that much harder, and getting some kind of a positive result from, engaging is going to become much more difficult. And that's going to impact us here in Scarborough Southwest, across the city, across any urban area in the province.
Yeah.
And I think people need to be made aware of these changes as well.
I'm going to dampen the mood even more, and let you know that there are appointments being made by this government on these tribunals.
Yes.
And they're making some very problematic decisions in terms of the way these appointments are being made. So whether these appointments are wonderful or not, we should have the ability to have individuals who are going to be taking on roles as adjudicators, for example, if they're going to be chair of whatever tribunal it is, whether it's a human rights or the land tribunal, we want to be able to call them and ask them questions about their experience, about their past work in relevant field. And one of the things we had just happened recently was the government decided so when the House is not adjourned, the committee is not sitting. When the House is not sitting, the committee is not sitting. That means that there's a certain amount of time passes. And once a certain amount of time passes, then those appointments get automatically appointed unless we ask for someone to be called in and for an extension. And that extension has to be approved unanimously, which means if government members do not vote for it, then we do not get that person coming to committee. And in our public appointments committee, government appointments, we don't get to question them. And that's what just happened recently. And this is one of the tribunals that's part of it as well. There are other ones as well, Landlord Tenant Board is one, Human Rights is one. And this is a very problematic trend of this government. And I'm actually, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., I'll be sitting in that committee with some new certificates and new individuals who are going to be appointed, and we get to ask them questions. But it depends. If the government doesn't want them to be heard, then they can find different ways to avoid that. And that's also a piece that I think a different piece that we have to tackle as well. So I want to say thank you to both of you. Go ahead, Alex.
I'm just going to say, why am I not surprised about the appointments? Anyways, okay.
Yeah,
that's
yeah. And yeah, they have. Recently we noticed that there is going to be which committee is it? There's going to be a committee where one of the failed candidates from the Conservative Party will be appointed the Conservative Party chair, I believe, or president is going to be appointed in another role as well. So it's a lot of family members of the Conservative Party that are getting appointed in different roles.
So if you don't mind me asking, has there been any uproar at Queen's Park about that one appointment? He's a developer, ran for a far right party in Italy.
Yeah.
He made the person I'm talking about.
I do. Mr. Cordellucci, we did, and Peter spoke about it, and we did raise it. Not enough media attention, unfortunately, but it was raised, and I wish government members would come forward and say, hey, why don't we do things in the democratic way? Why don't we do things that where people get to be a part of it, where we actually address certain issues, and then go ahead with decisions like this. But not enough. We need to have more people, more media, more politicians speak out as well.
Right.
Yeah. On that
happy note.
On that happy note, I'm going to wrap up because I know I've kept you half an hour extra than I promised. So I want to say thank you very, very much. I also want to thank the members from Joanna and Marianne from TRCA who were wonderful, giving us a whole background. I want to thank Peter Tabbins, our leader of the official opposition, for joining me. And I want to thank Michael Buns, Professor Michael Buns, who, one of the people who drafted the original Greenbelt, and thank him for his passion and for joining us this evening. I also want to thank Misha, Echo, and Alex for giving us a wonderful outlook, your passion, your energy, and the advocacy you do, as well as the solutions that you've pointed out. And it goes beyond political partisan stripes. I think we have to do a lot more as public representatives, and we have to work with our community partners and our organizations to really fight Bill 23. This is a dangerous piece of legislation that we cannot allow this government to pass. We have to protect our Greenbelt. And I know that many of you are signing the petition. So those of you who haven't, please do. If you would like to have a hard copy of the petition, you can pick up a copy at our office at 3110 Kingston Road. And those who have been signing those, it's wonderful because I can bring them in and I can read your petition in the legislature, and the minister has to respond to that. So please do, give me your petition. It's one of the best ways that I can actually raise this issue. If you also miss tomorrow's deadline or want to send us your statement about this bill or about anything else, and you have an issue that you would like me to raise in Parliament, always feel free to write to me. I love sharing individual stories, personal stories, and it's a very powerful way to tell the government that there are Ontarians who feel very strongly about what they're doing, and they have a say in this. And this government is to be representing the people of this province, and this is a really great way to remind them that. So please reach out to our office. You have our contact information. I hope that all of you out there will take a moment to write to us or write to the government. And thank you so much for joining me this evening. Thank you to all of you, my panelists, who joined me this evening as well. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you, Dolly. Thank you for fighting so hard for all the things that are right and good. We're so lucky to have you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, too.
Thank you. Really, really
Have a good night.
appreciate it. Good night.
Goodbye.
Bye,
Nice meeting
everyone.
you.
Stay safe out there.